Hello everybody, how's it going? So I'm taking some drive time here. Sorry if it's a little bit noisy, but I figured I'd take some drive time and do an episode of my journal, an entry into my journal, however you want to put it. And what I want to talk about today is, I'm going to do this in a couple of different parts. I'm going to start with my journey into Zen from my younger years to when I discovered the Plum Village Tradition, and then I'll go from there and do part 2 with the Plum Village Tradition to today. So, my journey into Zen. Well, people say, when did you start practicing Zen? And for me, I don't have an easy answer to that question, because the reality is that I actually started, depending on how you count, I actually started practicing Zen practice, aka Zazen, about 33 years ago, about 1991, which kind of surprises a lot of people, because I'll be 45 years old this year, and that means for the majority of my life, the significant majority of my life, I have actually practiced Zazen with different degrees of intensity and commitment, to be sure. But my first experiences with Zazen really were, and mindfulness, mindful breathing, were in about 1991, and it was brought to me by my karate teacher, Kinjo Sensei in Lethbridge, Alberta. Because at the end of each karate class, he would have us do a couple of minutes of Zazen, or mindful breathing. And so that was really the introduction to meditation in my life. And it was a big deal for me, because I really did enjoy it. And it sort of set the stage for me to become a meditation practitioner later on. And so that, you could say, that was the beginning of my Zen journey. In terms of an intellectual interest in Buddhism and Zen, I suppose that, you could say, started in about 1998, when I was at the University of Lethbridge in Lethbridge, Alberta, and I took an Introduction to World Religions class. And one of the things that I remember about that particular class was I was very interested in the Christianity piece, particularly where they talked about Catholicism. But the other piece that I was actually very interested in as part of the class was in the Buddhism section talking about Zen. And I remember actually at the time, there's, and you can still get this, you can still find it on, I know you can find it on Apple, like you can purchase the series, you can probably get it off of YouTube too. You can get the series called World Religions. And the Buddhism episode in that series actually focuses a great deal of attention on Zen. It starts with Zen and it goes into, there's I can't remember the name. He's a Roshi guy down in Kwang Roshi, I think, and he's down in California somewhere. He's an abbot of a monastery. He's still alive, I think. But the way he described Zen was of real interest to me, and so I began to look into it a little bit in the late 1990s. Now, in Lethbridge, Alberta at the time, although there is a Buddhist community there, and a fairly strong one, it's actually Pure Land Buddhism and not Zen. There's a big Japanese population in southern Alberta that arrived in a few different ways, mainly from Okinawa and other areas of Japan that practice Pure Land Pure Land Buddhism, not so much Zen. So there wasn't really a community, and at that time, I'm just talking late 1990s, as far as I know, there was no other Zen community anywhere near Lethbridge. I don't think there was one even in Calgary, which is a fairly sizable metropolitan center. There was some Zen, as I understand it, in the 70s, 80s, and 90s in different waves and different forms in Edmonton, where I live now. but it was completely unknown to me. And obviously Edmonton was about 5 hours down the road from Lethbridge, and the internet, we didn't have video conferencing or anything like that at the time, so that wasn't going to go anywhere. And so I kind of put it, back on the shelf, and I sort of reinterested myself in the Catholicism piece, went off to seminary, went off to be an army chaplain, etc., and really didn't give Zen another thought until about 2009. And I had moved back to Lethbridge after being in Edmonton for about 7, 8 years. And I took an Introduction to Buddhism course through the Religious Studies Department at the University of Lethbridge. So it was a 4-month academic credit course. And in that course, there was again an encounter with Zen. So one of the books in the course shared different stories, different experiences that practitioners have had with different forms of Buddhism. And one of them was the story about this person who did a 2-week stint at a Zen monastery in Japan. Sounds like it was actually a Rinzai monastery, not a Soto monastery. 1 week of which was a sesshin, and so a 1-week retreat. And so, this story goes into detail about his experiences at the Zen monastery. And again, I was incredibly intrigued. But I didn't really there was nothing sort of near me to go and look at in terms of Zen. By this time, there was a Zen community, a Soto Zen community in Calgary, and there was also a Plum Village Tradition community, Wild Rose Sangha in Calgary. But again, in 2009, video conferencing and that was really just kind of starting to come onto the scene. And nobody was doing it. Like, it was the pandemic really that brought about, in 2020, the whole Zoom thing and the ability to sit with Zen centers. Some Zen centers like Upaya had been doing YouTube videos and that sort of thing, which I'll get to in a little bit, because that was actually another point of encounter for me. But nobody was doing like any practice online. In Calgary, again, it's like 2 hours down the road from Lethbridge. So it wasn't a viable option for me to go up and practice with either of those two groups in Calgary. So again, I kind of lost, after the Buddhism course, and shortly thereafter, I kind of lost the story with Zen. And my story with Zen actually picks back up in 2017. I had moved back to Edmonton by this time, and I was kind of looking around at different traditions, and this is late 2017, and I found myself looking at Upaya Zen Center down in New Mexico and watching Dharma talks, and I watched a Jukai and novice ordination ceremony, and remember being very fascinated by it. And so it really sort of twigged my interest in Zen. Then in 2018 and 2019, I took 2 meditation teacher trainings. And in both of those teacher trainings, one of the things that we learned was practicing Zazen. And I recalled from my days back in karate that, hey, I've actually done this before. I've actually done Zazen in the context of my karate school. And so I began practicing Zazen regularly in 2019. And I did it, that's basically the point where I would say I started practicing consistently. I started practicing Zazen consistently, and continued to do so until 2021. I did it on my own, and I was watching Dharma talks from Upaya and Empty Gate Zen Center, some from Deer Park in the Plum Village Tradition as well. So by 2019, I was starting to rock and roll into the Zen journey in a serious way. And again, there wasn't really any Zen community that I was aware of locally in Edmonton. I guess there was a couple of Plum Village. There was a Wake Up community for a little while before the pandemic. And there was an offshoot from Plum Village, although it wasn't a straight-out Plum Village community in Edmonton, Happy Hearts. It employed some of the Plum Village, but it also did other things. It I think it was actually as attached to Spirit Rock, Vipanasa sort of meditation. Anyway, it wasn't until the pandemic, so it was late 2020, where I started sitting with some Zen centers because everybody was moving to Zoom. And the first Zen center, so I obviously Upaya, so I participated in their sits through YouTube and Zoom, etc., and also through Red Cedars in Washington State. I actually joined that group for a little while, and then not long after, I actually joined Brightway in Portland, Oregon, with Domio Burke, and in the spring of 2021, it was early summer 2021, I received the 16 Bodhisattva precepts in Jukai ceremony, because I'd been practicing for a little bit. And then I kind of went from there to start a community in Edmonton and Lethbridge. So by now, I had been in contact with Gyoke Yokoyama down. He was at the time, he was down at the Buddhist church in Long Beach Buddhist church. He was sort of the minister there, and then they moved him to Sozenji Zen Temple, which was a Soto Zen temple in Montebello in LA. And I got to know him really well because he spent time in Canada. His son was Canadian, and so he came to Edmonton. He did a novice ordination for me, and it was really the start of what became known as Rocky Mountain Zen, which I helped co-found. And it's still in existence today, and it's a really strong group of really great people. And so that's I got really into. I did a couple of practice periods and a couple of retreats with Upaya Zen and a little bit with Rocky Mountain Zen as time went on, etc. So some in-person and online stuff, right? Zazen Kai. I did a 3-day retreat in Lethbridge with Yokoyama Sensei as the teacher, with Rocky Mountain Zen. Did a 3-day sesshin there. So I have a bit of experience. And in January 2022, I sort of rediscovered the Plum Village Tradition. It was around the time that Thich Nhat Hahn passed away. And so I decided that I was going to, I'd looked at the Plum Village Tradition before, but I'd never really been, how do I put this? It didn't quite sit with me just yet. But in January of 2022, I sort of had a rediscovery and realized, lo and behold, there was a few Canadian Sanghas, one in Calgary, one in Vancouver, and I decided, wow, okay, I'm actually going to join these groups for practice. And that's where I'm going to leave this video as part 1, and I'm going to pick up part 2 in my practice in the Plum Village Tradition.